السلام عليكم جميعا. Thank you for joining us today. We'll start in a few minutes, inshallah. Stay tuned. السلام عليكم جميعا. Welcome to our webinar today. We're glad to have you here today. I'll go to the first thing, welcoming Nile US in this webinar. I'm glad to have this expert today with us. Before we start, allow me to introduce the panelists today we have. First of all, we have Mr. Andrew. Hi, Andrew. I think, yes, you are shining here in the camera.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
We are happy to have you, yes. And also Abu Karim, as usual, shining. And we are glad to have you again, Abu Karim. And we would like to hear more about Nile Mia here in the kingdom.
It's a pleasure to join this webinar today. Thank you, Akram.
Before we start, Abu Karim, do you want to tell us any good news regarding Nile Mia and to kick the session off?
So, this is our great pleasure to be joining by Andrew today and your esteemed attendees for our webinar. Let me start by saying that for decades, enterprise networks were built the same way: hardware first, security layered on, an operation left to the customer operation. But everything has changed over the last 2 decades. Users, devices, IoT, AI is everywhere. And again, security is a great concern for our customers, more and more. Today, now introduce a new standard. We are the world's most secure network delivered as a service. We are defining the moment for the future of enterprise campus network. The shift is from built on security to a true zero trust infrastructure architecture, built in natively inside the network or not on top of the network. It's not an option. And again, this is a new standard for the global market, and Nile is the pioneer and worldwide when it comes for network as a service, delivering business outcomes to a customer, not products. Again, thank you, and I hope that you enjoy our webinar today with Andrew going through the journey and the details. Hand over to you, Andrew. Go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Andrew Humber. I lead corporate marketing at Nile. And for the next 30 minutes, I want to help you do one thing. I want to help you walk into any vendor meeting and identify within 60 seconds whether or not the solution you're being presented is a true modern network as a service or something else entirely. So here's the honest framing for this session. Network as a service, or NaaS, is not a new phrase. It's been around for 2 decades. And right now, many vendors in the industry claim to offer it. But for many of them, NaaS is simply a new way to sell old problems. Equipment that you rent instead of buy, complexity that you still carry, and then outcomes that nobody is guaranteeing. The label changed, but the experience didn't. Nile was founded to change that, not by wrapping a service contract around legacy infrastructure, but by rethinking the entire model from a blank sheet of paper: what a network should do, who should be responsible for it, and what it should cost to run. So over the next half an hour, my goal is not to give you a product pitch. It's to give you a way to evaluate any NaaS offering that you come across, including ours, and to show you the business outcomes that this model is already delivering across industries like higher education, healthcare, and manufacturing. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to cover this story in 5 moves, okay? Firstly, what is a modern NaaS? And just as importantly, what is it not? There's real confusion in the market. We're going to clear it up today. Second, why does the industry need it, right? And we'll take a good look at where legacy architectures are genuinely failing businesses today. Thirdly, what's triggering the shift right now? Why is this conversation different in 2026 than it was in 2020? Nile's answer is our 4th move, why we took a clean slate approach and why an AI native platform built for the AI era was needed and what that architecture actually looks like at the business level. And then finally, the part that matters most, we're going to look at 5 concrete business outcomes brought to life across 3 very different industries. And we're going to do no product diagrams, no technical specs. This is a business conversation, okay? So let's start with the definition, okay? So what is network as a service and what isn't it, okay? And the best way to start that is with a version of NaaS that every single person on this call already uses. You may just never have thought of it that way, okay? So think about your home internet, okay? You subscribe to a provider. Here in California, it's probably Xfinity. In the Kingdom, it's probably STC or one of its peers, okay? You don't buy the modem or the Wi-Fi gateway. It arrives as part of a subscription. You might pay the equivalent of $10 a month for the equipment. You might pay $50 for the service itself, and then maybe another 10 for a firewall or some other kind of security add-on. So call it $70 a month all in. Now for that, you're getting a working home network. There's no capital purchase. There's no time spent researching access points. If the box breaks, they send you a new one. It just works. And when it doesn't, it's somebody else's problem to fix. Okay. Now that's a very traditional network as a service. Okay. A 20-year-old concept, born in the telco provider world. And for a small office, home office, small to medium sized business, it's good enough. Okay. Now, what Nile does is built on that same fundamental construct, okay? Subscription, no equipment costs, security and services included in one predictable fee. Same simplicity, same no surprises economics, right? But engineered for the enterprise, okay? And that word engineered is where the similarity ends, okay? Because there are 2 big differences between your home internet and what a mid-market or enterprise organization actually needs. Okay, so let me show you the first one. And here's the first difference, and it's a structural difference, right? So your internet service provider doesn't build the modem, okay? They're not the technology owner. They take equipment from an equipment vendor and they build their value on top, okay? So the orchestration layer, the management, the billing, the customer relationship, that's their contribution, okay? Now that model has a hidden cost, right? Because when a provider takes someone else's hardware or integrates it into their platform, the certification of that equipment can take a year, sometimes 2. And by the time it's live in your environment, that technology is already dated. Okay, so you're subscribing to yesterday's network. But again, for a small office, home office, as long as it works, it's okay, right? Now flip it around. The equipment vendors are the exact opposite. They own the technology, they build the boxes, but they don't operate them. There's no orchestration layer, no service delivery, no accountability for how the network actually performs day to day. Their involvement, practically speaking, right, ends at the loading dock, right? So you have providers who orchestrate but don't own the technology, and you have vendors who own the technology but don't operate it. Each half of that model is missing the other half. Niall's answer was to do both. So we built our own technology from scratch, the hardware, the software, the security architecture, and we operate it end to end as a service. Okay. One company accountable for the whole thing. No integration gaps, no certification lag, the very latest tech, and most importantly, no finger pointing between the people who made it and the people who run it. And that's difference number one, right? Difference, it's about ownership, okay? Difference number two is about what enterprise grade actually demands. Because here's one thing about your home network. The bar is low, and that's fine, right? Home internet is best effort, right? If your Wi-Fi drops for 10 minutes on a Tuesday evening, you reboot the router, you send a message to your provider and complain, life goes on, right? Um, and because the provider doesn't build the box, their economics are simple. If the box breaks, they replace it. Well, that logic collapses the moment you move into enterprise, okay? Because enterprise grade means scale, it means resiliency, it means you need equipment that's substantial enough that you service it rather than throw it away. And it means targeting the four nines of availability, right? Which allows for roughly 1 hour of downtime across an entire year. At the other end of that spectrum is carrier grade, which pushes it to five nines, really. And that's where the entire annual allowance for downtime is measured in minutes. Okay. So think about what an hour of downtime means in your world. Okay. That's a doctor locked out of patient records in a hospital. That's a stopped line with a cost you can calculate to the minute on a manufacturing floor. On a university campus during exam week, it's probably chaos, right? So the takeaway from this slide is simple, right? The subscription model from the home scales up beautifully, right? The engineering underneath does not, okay? You can't take a best effort swap don't service architecture and put an enterprise on top of it, okay? Nile is built for the enterprise and mid-market reality, not the Soho one, okay? And that brings us to a slide that I'd encourage you to screenshot because it's now the evaluation framework for everything else in the market. Now, not all NaaS is created equal. In fact, most of what carries the label falls into two categories, one of two categories, right? And neither one of them is what I would call modern, okay? First is what I'll call vendor NaaS, right? Now, this is the equipment maker who says, instead of buying my equipment, rent it. Pay a monthly subscription, your OpEx moves to CapEx. Sounds like progress. But ask yourself what actually changed with this model, right? The architecture is the same, the operations are the same, the complexity is the same. You still own the burden, you just don't own the boxes, right? So everything that happens after delivery, the monitoring, the fixing, the patching, the securing, all sits with you one way or another. Now, either you manage it yourself or you hand it to a managed service provider, in which case you've added a middleman without removing the risk, right? And in most of these arrangements, the vendor's operational involvement in what you're doing ends the day they ship you the equipment. Now, that's not a service, okay? That's financial engineering wrapped around old boxes. Changes the line on the budget where the pain shows up, doesn't change the pain, okay? Now, the second category is provider NaaS, right? The model we just talked about. This is real orchestration, this is real service delivery, but it's built on someone else's tech. And with that 1 to 2 year certification lag, baking obsolescence, if you will, into the offering, and typically little or no genuine AI operations underneath the hood, okay? And then there's the third column, which is modern NaaS, which is what Nile set out to build. Okay, this is technology built from scratch. This is operated end to end by the company that built it. This is AI-driven autonomous operations that are native to the architecture, not bolted on afterwards. And because there's no certification lag and there's no legacy debt, the platform stays current continuously, the way you'd expect from any modern cloud service. So here's the one question that I would offer you for any NaaS conversation that you're in, right? Who is accountable for the outcome after the equipment arrives? Okay. If the answer is you are, but with different financing, you're looking at a wrapper. Okay. If the answer is the provider contractually with their own technology, now you're looking at something modern. Okay. So that's the definition. Look, the obvious next question is why does any of this matter? Okay. Why does the industry need a new model at all? So let's look at what the old one is actually costing and why the industry needs it now. So I want you to look at this slide and be honest with yourself about how much of it you recognize. Okay. The typical enterprise LAN today, okay? The wired and wireless network running your campuses, your hospitals, your manufacturing plants, your offices is running an architecture that was fundamentally designed in the 90s and has been patched, extended, and duct taped ever since. That legacy shows up in three ways. Okay. First, higher operational costs. Okay. MSP overhead layered on top because your own team can't cover it all. The constant training and specialized skill sets just to keep the lights on. All of it fighting for budget at a time where funding cuts, lean IT, tight CapEx cycles are becoming the norm, right? There's even a new line item creeping in now to shadow AI, so the tools that our employees are already paying for and using without anyone signing off. Cost is showing up in places now in the budget that was never originally planned for. Okay. Second, point solutions with security bolted on, not built in. Underneath all of this sits aging hardware, right? Legacy switches, legacy wireless, multiple controllers, each with its own management planes. Then years after that network was designed, security gets added on as an appliance, okay? Add VLAN sprawl and IoT OT devices that were never meant to live on the corporate network in the first place, and you have a security model that's assembled from parts that were never designed to properly work together. Third is operational complexity, and this is now across the industry a permanent condition, right? Low visibility into what's actually connected, fragmented management, policy spaghetti, rules layered on rules, to the point where no one can confidently turn anything off because they don't know what they'll impact if they do. AI agents add another fresh line, right? And the endless patching and upgrade windows that swallow all of your team's time. All of it feeding into that same compliance and security posture headache. So here's the uncomfortable truth that ties this all together, right? Complexity isn't just an inconvenience, right? Complexity in itself is a security vulnerability because every layer of sprawl is another crack that an attacker can find. It's widening your attack surface, right? So securing the LAN doesn't need another tool on top of the pile, right? It needs a fundamental rethink. And that's when you ask why organizations tolerate this. The answer usually comes down to how the industry has taught us to think about cost, which brings me to my next slide. Now, for 30 years, the industry has trained buyers to focus on the box, right? The data sheet, the port count. Procurement negotiates hard on the hardware and everyone shakes hand and the deal is done. But the box is really only 20% of the total cost of running the network. The other 80% is operations, and it's underwater like the bottom of the iceberg on this slide. The engineers doing patches at 2 in the morning, the truck rolls, the troubleshooting, the renewal negotiations. You have 5 to 7 years of accumulating complexity and manpower investment, all of it sitting outside the purchase order, right? That everyone celebrated on day one of signing it. Um, Even analysts in this sector that rank this market are largely organized around the boxes, not the ops. So the whole conversation becomes anchored, excuse me, to the 20%. So the phrase we use internally, and you can steal it if you like, is think outside the box, literally, right? So when you evaluate network economics, stop pricing the hardware and start pricing the operations because that's where 4 out of every $5 are actually going. Nile's model exists precisely because of this math, right? We don't sell you the 20% and wish you luck with the 80, right? We take ownership of the entire life cycle, the box and the ops, and deliver the whole thing as one guaranteed service. When you look at it through that lens, the economics of the legacy models stop making sense very quickly. Now, none of these problems are new. Legacy networks have been expensive and complex for years. So the fair question is why is this coming to a head now? What changed, right? So let's look at the specific triggers. There are several forces converging at the same time right now, and I group them into three pressures and two important accelerants, and one specific one for the KSA region. The three pressures first, right? Let's call them workplace, workspace, workforce. Okay. The workplace is seeing return to office, return to campus mandates, which are colliding with hybrid work expectations. People are back in buildings, but they're bringing cloud-first habits, video-heavy workflows, and an expectation that connectivity is as reliable as electricity. The network has to absorb all of these realities at once. The workspace, the physical environment itself, right, is filling up with devices that nobody controls. Unpatched endpoints, unsecured IoT, operational technology, OT that was never designed with security in mind. Every sensor, every camera, every badge reader, for example, are all connected devices that will probably never run a security agent as long as they exist. And lastly, the workforce itself, right? The IT team responsible for all of this is lean and getting leaner. Okay. Teams are being asked to do more with less. And now they have a whole new population to manage on top of everything else. AI agents, AI-driven tools appearing across the business, sanctioned or otherwise. Um, so those are the pressures. Now the accelerants, and this is where really the urgency is coming from. AI readiness is the technical urgency, okay, and a topic of this conversation. The AI era demands a network that was built to support it, right? Not slow it down. AI-enabled workforces and workflows mean real-time inference, large amounts of data movement, always-on connectivity. These workloads expose the limits of fragmented networks very quickly, right? You can't run a modern AI strategy on infrastructure designed before the smartphone existed. It's a bit like entering a Formula One race with a really well-maintained delivery truck. It's a great truck. It's just in the wrong race, right? And then our second accelerant is Vision 2030, the market urgency. Okay. And that's one that's especially real for this audience. Now, the kingdom's investment in digital infrastructure is accelerating modernization across every sector. In this region right now, network modernization isn't an option you weigh, right? It's a mandate that companies are executing. The question is, how well are they doing it, right? And there's a competitive dimension worth naming, which is that organizations moving first aren't just avoiding risk, okay? They are setting the operational benchmark that their peers will be measured against later. In a fast transforming market, being the standard beats chasing it, right? Now, if you sit in the executive suite, um, these forces land on your desk as kind of three questions, and they're usually asked by three different people, right? The CIO asks, how do we move faster, right? Every business initiative, new site, new application, new AI deployment lands on the network first, right? And legacy drag can turn implementation weeks into quarters. Managing change on old architecture is expensive and it's slow. The CISO wants to understand if we're adding risk, okay? Because every one of these initiatives also expands the attack surface, right? And when security is bolted onto a network rather than built into it, growth and risk rise together, right? And as we said earlier, complexity itself has become a threat. And finally, the CFO wants to understand, how they simplify the balance sheet, how to make as much of their costs predictable, because the legacy model delivers the exact opposite, right? It's lumpy CapEx, it's surprise operational costs, it's spend that's very hard to tie to outcomes. And here's what's interesting about this slide is that these questions seem like they're in tension, speed versus risk versus cost. And on legacy architectures, they genuinely are, right? Every gain on one access can cost you on another. The real promise of a modern NaaS is dissolving that trade-off, making the network faster to change, safer by design, and more predictable in cost, all at the same time. It's a big claim. So let's talk about how Nile actually approached it and why we started from a clean slate. So when Nile's founders looked at everything we've just discussed, they reached the conclusion that, sounds obvious in hindsight, but was radical at the time, right? You can't fix this by just adding another layer, right? Every previous attempt to modernize the network added something on top, another controller, another overlay, another management tool, right? Each addition made the pile taller and the problem worse, right? So the only way was to start over, a clean sheet of paper, just like the one we're staring at right now. And on that sheet, there were three things, and there were three things only. Okay. First was a zero trust fabric. Okay, this is the network itself. So wired, wireless, IoT, OT with security built into its foundation, not bolted on afterwards. Okay, every device, every user is continuously identified and verified before anything flows. Okay, in practical terms, instead of a network trusting whatever's plugged into it, only to then try and police it afterwards with add-on tools, you get a network where trust is never assumed in the first place. Security stops being a product category you buy and becomes the very fabric of the infrastructure that you stand on. Okay. Second was cloud services. And think of this as the AI brain, right? So the entire network is streaming data into the cloud around the clock. And a growing catalog of services runs on top, all delivered under one OpEx subscription. Okay, no appliances to side, no licenses to true up, no version upgrade projects, right? The same consumption model you already expect from every other modern service in your business, finally applied to your network. Okay. And the last is autonomous operations. Okay, so powered by AI across the entire life cycle. That's from day zero planning and design through day one deployment into day two and beyond monitoring, operating, remediation, and so on. The routine day-to-day work of running the system is done through AI, supervised through our command center, right, with an agentic architecture underneath. The issues that used to consume your team's time get detected, diagnosed, and in most cases resolved before anyone opens a ticket. Security built in, intelligence in the cloud, ops that run themselves. All three designed together from scratch, powered by AI, because that's the only way it can be done right. Now here's how that philosophy sort of translates into what you consume. So the foundation is Nile Access. That's the core secure network service, and this is about as technical as I'm going to get. That's the mandatory starting point, right? That's your wired and wireless connectivity, delivered with the zero trust fabric underneath and the performance guarantee around it. On top of that sits the Nile service catalog, which are the services that you consume a la carte as your needs grow. That's guest, that's radius, that's DHCP, trust and edge services. These aren't separate products you procure. They are services you switch on as you need them. Okay. The network grows the way your cloud stack grows, right? Not by subscription, by subscription, not by project. And wrapped around it, autonomous operations across the entire life cycle, day zero to two, as we discussed on the previous slide. And where genuinely bespoke work is needed, we have, complex integrations or specialized projects. We have professional services and experts in there as well. So notice what's missing from this picture, right? There's no moment where responsibility transfers back to you. No handoff when the vendor's job ends and your burden begins, right? That gap, the one we identified way back on the ownership slide, simply doesn't exist here, okay? Because the company that built it is the company that's operating it, right? So that's the model. Now the bit that you probably actually came for, which is, the outcomes. Okay, what does this do for your business? And rather than come at this from an abstract point of view, I'm going to ground this in real data from three industries because we've recently completed a number of reports where we've spoken to real customers who are experiencing these problems on a day-to-day basis. And so this is real data from real practitioners in their segments. So we'll come to that in just a second. But let's talk about the five S's first, okay? Because each one of these attaches to a number, and this is really the meat of what we offer in terms of our outcomes, okay? So the first is simplicity, right? With autonomous hands-off operations, customers report ticket reductions approaching 99%. Now read that number really carefully, okay? Because it's not tickets resolved faster. It's tickets that never existed because the system caught them and fixed them before a human even noticed, okay? Think about what your IT team could achieve on a daily basis if firefighting network issues was just no longer an issue, okay? Security, with zero trust built into the fabric, and we have data center class segmentation, as we talked about, applied to every device on the network. Customers see breach reductions between 60 and 100%. The architecture narrows really what any single intrusion can reach. So one compromised laptop or device can never really become an organization-wide event. speed. With a SaaS-like infrastructure, change management runs roughly 3 times faster. So new sites, new policies, new services, configured once in software, enforced everywhere, okay, instead of going site by site. The Nile solution is the same for every single customer, okay? It's a really important message to remember. Every single customer deployment is the same, right? All that changes is the scale of that deployment and the services applied on top, right? And that's a huge step towards achieving simplicity and faster change. Savings. So between the shift from CapEx to OpEx, we eliminate truck rolls, retired point products, the operational burden we take off the team. Customers see cost reductions from 30 to 50%, okay, more in many cases, with the added benefit that that cost is now flat and predictable versus, spiky and surprising. And then the fifth S, and the one I'd argue most is the most important, is the SLA, right? Because now it's the only enterprise that contractually commits to availability, coverage, capacity, and financially backs those commitments. If the service doesn't perform, we're accountable in real dollars, not in apologies, not in a please join us for a roadmap conversation, but that accountability, simply doesn't exist in the box and license model the industry's lived with for 30 years. And it really changes the nature of the relationship. And it's something that our customers, find extremely valuable in our engagements. So those are the claims. Let's now pressure test these across 3 industries, okay? Because we've surveyed these companies, as I mentioned, and really their numbers, tell their own story. So let's start with higher education. The blue boxes here are the Nile outcomes, and the realities that we got through our surveys are in the white boxes below. So we surveyed over 100 IT leaders and execs in the higher ed space, colleges, universities, schools. And we learned that 94% of campus IT teams describe themselves as understaffed, critically understaffed, or fully staffed but constantly firefighting. 94%, which means that only 6%, which is almost just a rounding error, say they're comfortably managing, right? 61% experience network outages monthly or more often on campuses where an outage during an exam window is an institutional event, not an IT ticket, right? Downtime during exams, not great for higher ed. And when we asked whether their network could prevent or contain a breach, confidence split exactly 50-50. Half the sector is essentially flipping a coin on containment, okay? Now map that model against reality, right? Autonomous operations give lean teams their time back. The firefighting cycle is exactly the workload that a true modern NaaS is designed to absorb. The financially backed SLA converts outages are just part of life into predictable, guaranteed uptime. And zero trust built into the fabric replaces that coin flip, with an architecture you can actually defend and stand by. And the sector knows it. 91% of the institutions we surveyed said they are open to or already adopting AI-powered NaaS, right? And in a sector as decentralized and governance heavy as higher education, 91% is not a mild signal, okay? It's a sector concluding out loud that the old operating model has reached its limits. So let's look at healthcare, where we surveyed, this was a bigger group, over 300 leaders and executives globally. This raises the stakes significantly, right? Because network reliability is a patient safety issue. Okay, 43% named cybersecurity threats and ransomware as their top network challenge. 66% describe themselves as strained or firefighting. And interesting enough, that includes teams that are fully staffed, which tells you that the problem is the operating model, not the headcount, right? 38% see disruptions to clinical systems, electronic health records, imaging, patient monitoring, and they're seeing that monthly or more often. Now think about what that means, right? Infrastructure interruptions to patient care have become routine enough to be almost normalized, right? Now against that, zero trust segmentation gets security teams ahead of the ransomware because unpatchable medical devices, which hospitals are full of, get isolated at the network layer, okay, which is the only place they can be protected. Um, Autonomous operations, they break the firefighting cycle. The availability guarantee keeps clinical systems up. Reframing reliability as to what it actually is in a hospital, which is a measure of, the quality of that establishment and that clinic, not an IT service level. And again, the appetite's there. 64% of healthcare organizations told us they're open to a secure NaaS model. And in a sector that's as cautious and regulated as healthcare, that's a very meaningful shift. And finally, manufacturing, which is just last year was the most attacked industry in the world, due to its, high value supply chain and complex operational environments. Ransomware threats in manufacturing were up 61% year over year. Industry average time to detect and contain a ransomware attack was 42 days. Organizations with great visibility cut that to about 5. Same threat, month and a half difference, purely down to architecture, right? And if you want to know what's at stake, one automaker's 2025 breach forced a global production shutdown. That's a cost that's not measured in the ransom note, but in every vehicle that didn't get built. Um, Now, for manufacturers, zero trust segmentation narrows that blast radius before it's ever put to the test, right? A compromised laptop can't become a plant-wide shutdown because the network was never exposed to it to begin with. Continuous visibility collapses containment from weeks to days. The availability guarantee protects the only metric that a plant truly runs on, which is uptime, right? And the economics land hard here as well, because customers in this space report 30 to 60% reductions in total cost of ownership. So what we have here is 3 completely different industries, right, with very different risk profiles: a campus, a hospital, a production line, and underneath all 3, the same gap: the legacy architecture, stretched teams, bolted on security. One model addresses all of these problems. Why? Because the root cause was never industry specific. It was always architectural. All right, so let me bring this home. And let's just end this by talking about, why Nile? Now, if you remember one slide from today, let's make it this one, right? Because every leader in your organization is going to get their own zero, right? So for the CISO, zero trust, okay, as we talked about several times in this presentation. Security as a property of the network, not a bolt-on, right? Fewer breaches, smaller blast radius, security posture you can defend to your board, okay? The CIO, zero tickets. Autonomous operations that resolve issues before users really feel them. Okay. Escalations collapse and your team's calendar fills up with strategy instead of firefights. For the network and security teams, zero touch. Okay. The patching, the tuning, the remediation that consumed their lives is handled by the service. Their productivity, their job satisfaction goes up. For the CFO, zero CapEx, right? One predictable subscription. No refresh cliffs, no surprise licensing, no 5-year depreciation debates, costs you can actually plan, okay? And lastly, for the CEO, zero risk, okay? The industry's only financially backed performance guarantee. The network stops being a leap of faith and becomes a contractual outcome. And your provider becomes a true partner dedicated to the success of your business, just like Nile's customers see us. 5 stakeholders, 5 zeros, one very simple decision. So let me leave you with 3 takeaways. Firstly, the definition, and take this one with you and apply it to every conversation you have from here on out when talking about your network, okay? Modern NaaS means zero trust fabric, plus cloud services, plus autonomous operations, delivered as a service by the company that built the technology, okay? Anything less, rented boxes, wrapped legacy, outsourced but not owned operations is the old model wearing new clothes, okay? And now you know the one question that exposes it. Who's accountable after the equipment arrives? Second, the evidence, okay? Now, nothing I've talked about here today is theoretical. The outcomes are proven across higher education, healthcare, manufacturing, and others. 3 sectors that agree on almost nothing, yet report the same pain and are already responding to the same fix. And the third is timing. With the demands of the AI era, the question facing organizations isn't whether to modernize the network, it's how fast can we do it. and whether your business will set the benchmark or spend the next 5 years chasing it. Okay. That's it for the main part of our presentation. I'll leave you with a URL where you can learn more about Nile, and I'll just highlight these four flagship pieces of content that go deep on AI and on some of the vertical markets that we've touched on today. The healthcare report will be released in the coming weeks, and we'll be sure to share that with all of you attending this call. And finally, I also wanted to ensure that you all have this page bookmarked. This is our page dedicated to the Nile MEA team and the KSA region. On here, you'll find resources like past webinars, this one as well, I would assume, reports and other collateral. There's some corporate introduction videos and numerous case studies from customers in the region, including Black Cat, Mayer, and Leap, and Aramco Ventures, Tasama, and many others. So with that, I'd like to thank the Solutions by STC team for organizing this event. It's been fun, and I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Thanks for your time. Bye now.
It's a pleasure we have Andrew over here with us. Let me put it this way: Nile-based Space San Jose, California, they are very committed to the region and the localization of it, based that we have moved Nile platform to be in a local cloud in Saudi Arabia in Google Cloud, which is abiding by the local regulators from NCA, and we are compliant with the NCA requirements and with the data sovereignty in the kingdom. And also Nile today have various customer references and great successes in different segments, whether in healthcare or education or oil and gas. Again, and PIF companies. Also, we ran major events over the last couple of years, whether the Leap events or Black Hat, Cityscape, Global Health, and many others. So thank you for your time today, and looking forward to get engaged with you and go through the journey of the next generation enterprise campus network. Akram.
Thank you, Abu Karim. And I think we come to the end. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought. Today's discussions highlighted just how fast the landscape is shifting. If you are looking to stay ahead of the curve and leveraging the latest emerging technology, I highly encourage you to explore Nile, as Abu Karim mentioned, and Andrew. And thank you again for our audience to attending this webinar, and we are glad to have you in next session, inshallah. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.